Okay, here we are. Welcome to another episode of Morelia Python Radio. This is episode 574. And Owen, we're veering off a little bit. We're going off topic a bit, still within our wheelhouse
It's
of pythons.
pythons. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
we've
complete-
we've gone worse. We've gone
Yeah.
further. Yeah.
The complete reticulated python came out maybe a couple months ago, and Glen is here to talk with us about the process of writing the book and why reticulated pythons. And welcome to NPR. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So yeah, go ahead, Owen.
So I guess where we would start with this, I don't know why somebody forgot how this works after 13 years, but here we are. It was, I guess, kind of give us a little bit of a brief overview of your collection as it stands now and what kind of brought you in to reptiles and maybe specifically retics.
Mm-hmm. So currently I have the lamest collection, don't have any retics. I moved to Florida about a year
There it is.
ago.
That's why. I'm like, wait. Oh, wait, no.
But even before then, very minimal. I pride myself on being a keeper first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk more about breeding, I'm sure, at the towards the end. But my interest really lies in keeping. And so right now I only have 2 green tree pythons.
Okay.
So glutton for punishment and expensive animals. I know you guys love your chondros, even though you don't have them anymore.
Right.
Not a single one, but yes.
But through the years, ball pythons, obviously retics, tarantulas, bearded dragon. I don't know what else. Lots of random things that kind of come and go.
Mm-hmm.
But never bred anything, have really no interest in it. So that might be a topic for conversation down the road. Because I think that's an area where herpetoculture can improve or at least have a different mindset about.
Definitely.
And then what was the other part of it? Sorry.
What kind of drew you into reptiles and then specifically a love, even if you don't keep them, for retics?
Yeah. So all of my the whole reason I love reptiles is all about my childhood.
Okay.
Always weird kid. I would watch Steve Irwin feverishly. I had a little box TV in my room as a kid, and I would just watch the Crocodile Hunter movie on repeat. It would be like midnight. I have no idea why my parents let me do this, but horrible parenting in hindsight. But I would just watch it on repeat because I was so obsessed with watching this person interact with nature in that way, especially the dangerous animals. But he did it with such grace and respect. And that is something I've always tried to carry with me because those aren't necessarily characteristics we see a whole lot of today in the more entertainment side of things. There's obviously pros and cons because they're getting eyes on herpetoculture and they're, some level of education. But with people like Steve Irwin, it was always about the education, even though there was a sensationalism. For retics, once again, going back to my childhood and talk about this in the book again, is that Austin Stevens went out to, I believe, Borneo, and he was looking for a man-eating python, and he found it. This beautiful, beautiful reticulated python, and it tried to bite him and eat his face, just very aggressive, the kind of quintessential wild-caught animal, obviously, because it's in the wild. It's supposed to be defending itself, but always just mesmerized by an animal of that beauty and, of course, that size. When you talk about retics, there's nothing else like it. Maybe anacondas, but they move very differently. They think very differently. So size becomes a very important factor on that. And then as I got older, I learned more about the herpetoculture side of things. When I was growing up, I wasn't too terribly far from Jay Brewer's place. So I went down there quite a few times. And that was my introduction to seeing reptile breeding on a large scale, especially for reticulated pythons, because even then, not too many other people did it at a large scale like that. Bob Clark, Nerd, but Ben Retic, but not to that extent. So it was very interesting to see all of those snakes in one place and all of the different colors they would come in. And that was at the height of the world's first era. So every tub would be a different, this is
different
the only
thing.
one in the world. Yeah. Luckily, we've moved past that a little bit. And there's still once again, merits to that. However, it gets a little tiresome when everything ends up being a solid yellow snake and there's no real refinement.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there was a lot of I know Matt, when he bred his retics, there were a bunch of people looking at his clutch and saying that there could be potential world first, and a lot of people put a lot of stock into that when it came to retic breeding, as opposed to like you said, where the path goes after we get the world's first. It's like, well, yeah, but and then solid yellow snake. It's like kind of like, how much further can we take this really? So
Absolutely. And you lose, at least in my eyes, what makes a retic. And that's disappointing, because why not just breed ball pythons?
Well, and also it's like, having been to recently, my wife and I went out to the Columbus Zoo, and when you're in a zoological facility like that, you'd expect their retic. Like, I want a mainland retic. I want a normal retic. I want to see a reticulated pattern on a retic. I think they had like a purple lavender albino tiger, and I'm like, wait a minute, like, and it wasn't even that big, and I'm like,
of course,
wait a minute, like, you know, and then I understand they probably got it from a seizure or for something else, but it's like, I feel like I want to see what I would see out there, like no mutation kind of thing, and but yeah.
Do you feel like, I feel like that there was sort of this success with ball pythons, that every community that starts to get some morphs going sort of try to apply the same blueprint to it, and it just never works for other species the way it works for ball pythons, and it usually turns into, you know, a mess.
You guys are living proof of that in the carpet python world. You are known because of your work on refinement instead of gene stacking.
Yeah,
but I feel like also in the ball python world, there are people that found their mutation and stuck with it. As the rest of the field kept rolling forward, they stayed here and refined, and now people are like, well, I need this person's something or other because they have the best. So I feel like with carpet python, and probably with retic, is that if you kind of pause at the mutation that you really like and just kind of refine, you could leap over everybody else that way. But
here's a thought that I have. Let me get your feeling on this thought, Glenn. It's sort of like, you know, just like I sort of said, applying that blueprint, the ball python blueprint, to retics. I think the difference with retics is that the animals actually age into beautiful animals. I mean, you know what I mean? Like they're phenomenal. And like you're starting with a base animal that's phenomenal, and then you're just adding, you know, albino on top of it, or this or that, or whatever it would be. And, you know, similar to what we see with carpets, if you have beautiful, you know, base animals, they're going to make beautiful offspring. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like that sort of kicked it into like, oh my God, look at these crazy things. Is that sort of am I right? Or
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with carpets, you have, I would call it an advantage, where you have a prolonged period of time before you truly see what that animal will turn out to be. So you have incentive to keep it, and then that spurs further refinement because you have that time invested, compared to, you know, you pick the one that looks best after the first shed, you sell the rest. However, that extra time gives you more opportunity for refinement. Yeah.
And I mean, I also feel like there is some development in retic. Like, they don't just like shed their skin and it's like, oh God, my eyes. Like, I think it takes a little bit too. And I feel like I'd rather have
some of those morphs.
I mean, some, like, listen, some, but I think with a retic, it's the same way. It's an okay baby, but then after about a year or two is when you really start seeing the color, when it really starts to spread out, when it starts to brighten up, when it starts getting cleaner. So I feel like I want pythons that grow up into their thing, as opposed to be like, like I want it to get better with age. It's like a fine wine, you know?
Absolutely.
So when you're looking at these collections and these morphs and these worlds first, is the idea of a book brewing then? Is like what's your headspace like that? Are you like,
as a 12-year-old, you know, I just was so enthralled with the idea.
Book.
No. Um, from a young age, I knew I possessed the literary pen that only others would dream of.
The first draft was actually
Come on, you
in
can't
crayon.
tell me that young Mutton
Yeah,
wasn't
it was-
sitting back
yeah.
going, I'm going to conquer the carpet python world one day.
No. So the genesis story of the book is very uneventful, unfortunately.
Okay.
I wish there was some grand story I could tell of people wanting this, there being an outpouring of, cries for something good. There was nothing. I'm a proud nobody in this world. However, as I grew, obviously getting more experience in herpetoculture and then pursuing a degree in biology, and now I'm pursuing my doctorate in veterinary medicine, I have a little piece of each of these worlds that isn't necessarily shared by a lot in herpetoculture. So I have, a part of the academia side, a part of the herpetoculture side, and a part of the veterinary side. And often someone will focus on one of those and not be too involved with the others. I mean, Dr. Julander is a great example of someone who is involved in all three worlds, but that's rare. And then it's rare for someone to take that and combine it in a singular format that can help others. And that's what I wanted to do with the book, because if I was only a breeder or keeper, it would be pretty much focused on that. If I was only on the academia side, it would be mostly on that. And of course, veterinary is mostly veterinary. But I saw a lot of potential and a lot of benefit for the community if there was a book that could bring all three of these worlds together. Because there's such a huge disconnect that's very frustrating. And it all comes back to us loving animals. We do it in different ways. However, that original uniting passion should be able to unite us. So that was the idea with the book. The actual genesis story is there was a lot of bad information. It's tiresome to see, but that's not incentive to write a book.
Yeah.
However, I was doing research with fruit flies, very boring in my eyes. I'm not a geneticist, don't have a whole lot of interest in novel transgenes of Drosophila melanogaster I. And my part of the research project was finished, and I'd have to move on to something else. And I didn't want to spend all day doing PCR gels that weren't working regardless. So I approached my mentor with this idea of, can I write at least the more the herpetology section of this book for my research project? And he said, go for it. So I was off to the races at that point. I was very blessed to have someone willing to let me do that. And so I took it and ran.
Nice.
Cool.
That's
So,
awesome.
I mean, was there any, I would imagine, because we've had people who write the books and stuff like that, and friends of ours who always seem to be kind of larger names in the species, like Nick Mutton with carpet pythons and stuff like that. I almost feel like if I were to run out and write the carpet python book, they'd be like, why the hell are you writing it? So was there any pushback by any of the larger retic breeders that like saying that you're writing it as opposed to they would be ready? Like, oh, no, I'm going to write the book. It's like, well, you've had how long to do it? And you didn't do it. Like, I don't. Yeah. So was there any of that kind of stuff, or was it all open arms? Everybody was kind of really excited about it.
That's a good question. So there are some people who obviously, say they were writing a book or what have you. I haven't seen anything further.
People keep telling us that they're about to do a podcast. Our first year, people were like, "Oh, I'm going to do a podcast." Okay, yeah. And not here yet.
So there's that. And I also tried to approach the book in a way to be welcoming to the old keepers and the new keepers alike. So off air, we were talking about the captive history, and that was something I really focused on because I can pay homage to the people who came before me, who did all of this work, who had animals die because there was no blueprint for this.
Right.
They had to figure it out. So by devoting a lot of time and energy and really trying to show how much effort and work they put in, I think that put me in the good graces. And not being direct competition as a breeder or trying to be someone who I'm not. I like to be very upfront about who I am, what I stand for, my experience or lack of. So nothing too serious
Okay.
in terms of pushback, but of course other people were writing a book and then I think were upset that someone else was going to write a book and then subsequently published it.
Mm.
That you actually like did it. Like,
Yeah.
that was, yeah.
And if someone comes out with a better book, that's great because then there's more information about them.
I don't understand that whole thing of like, well, somebody else already wrote the book. That we can have more than one book, like we can have a
Yeah.
few. Like,
I mean, especially with your perspective, right?
Yeah.
With being in the three camps, like that to me is a very unique perspective in herpetoculture.
Mhm.
So, that alone to me screams, oh, okay. Yeah. I want to hear what this person has to say,
Yeah. And if there are more books, it'll work itself out
Yeah,
in terms of
sure.
I got
quality
plenty of
and whatever.
bookshelf space, and it'd be,
Yeah.
and I'm all right with more books and more things to put out there to learn. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's fine. I don't one, yeah.
I
But-
did love the captive. I was talking about this before we started, the captive history timeline in there that you have. Like, where did you start with that? How long did it take you to do that? Like, what was that process like?
Did any parts of it surprise the hell out of you, or you're like, no?
Oh my God. That was very arduous because it didn't exist. And the people who I thought would know didn't know. And that was incredibly surprising.
Yeah.
I thought the people who were encyclopedias about even the history would have known this stuff. You guys know Calatos and Madus,
Yeah.
how long they've been around. There's not a specific answer for who was the first to breed them.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, there's not some person screaming from a mountaintop that they were the first person to do it.
Nope.
I mean,
Or was that just lost to history? Or like, did that person
that's
just
interesting?
Oh, weird.
So I mean, the earliest people obviously did it, but the
Right.
purposeful one for Madu was 2011 by Rodney, and for Kalatoa's, I still don't have a date. No one couldn't offer me one, which is shocking.
I mean, but it had to.
Wow.
It had to happen.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it had to happen, and also like because you're not working with strictly wild caught animals, so it had to happen. That's so weird. See, and stuff like this is why we do like herp history episodes and stuff like that, because this is how quickly stuff can just get lost.
Yes.
Towed under. The one
Sure.
person who knows is either out of herpetoculture and doesn't care, or nobody ever wrote it down, and then it's gone.
Yep.
So, wow.
Have there been people that you ran into doing that maybe were unknown or not really like I'm you know what I mean? Not craving the spotlight, if you will, like sort of behind the scenes type of people? Did you?
Oh, absolutely. And those are the most fun people to talk to, because a lot of them are very excited to share their story, but either no one has asked or they don't want to publicly come out and say it. So you can learn a lot from those people, especially if you know how to approach that subject. More on the UK side of things, that could just be cultural as well. But it was fun to find those, kind of trace those small pieces of history. Like, okay, so-and-so did this, but so-and-so did that. I talk about this in the book, but 3 different people claim to have been the first to breed super dwarfs. And they were all, I fully believe they thought they were correct. And obviously only one person could have done it. But it also goes back to talking to as many different people as you can. So you find those little nuggets of, oh, this is actually not how it's claimed to be.
Did you have a post? Did you have like a wall in one of your bedrooms with string leading
Like
to other places?
Yeah, that's for something else, though.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, like, no, that has nothing to do with this. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, but because I feel like sometimes in the reptile hobby, like you peel back the layers and it starts becoming a jumbled mess of string, and it's just like it's got to be so hard to get that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're saying that. And like, I think about just my experience when I was a kid with my dad with reticulated pythons, and like, basically they were wild caught. They were imported. These are mainland animals. They are vicious. They want to eat you, they're just not happy at all. We probably weren't keeping them right and all that stuff. We didn't have none of the technology that we have today. but like nobody. I never heard my dad talk about like, oh, this is from this line, or like that just didn't exist. It was just like, I want a retic.
Yeah.
There's a retic. I'm
Yep.
getting it. There was like not a question of where did it come from, or and maybe that's just my dad, but that's just my dealing with that. It's just
You're absolutely right. So I wanted to ask both of you a question. You are near Hank Molt's place, right?
Yes.
Yes. So Hank Malt's place, his house was actually, I guess, his original place was a block away from where my best friend's house was growing up. And so Hank Malt's house was in the same neighborhood as me. I grew up about a block away from Martin's Aquarium, and then Hank Malt's actual place was this tiny little storefront in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, where I've spent many years running around as a kid. So yes, we're both right in Hank Malt's backyard.
That's the next township over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you ever see Retics there?
Never. I mean,
never really.
The other thing is that I also, when I was
at
growing
Martin's
up,
Aquarium?
I mean, Martin's Aquarium, you probably a ton, but when I was growing up, I was kind of giving snakes a wide berth. Like I didn't start getting interested in snakes until college. And by then Martin's Aquarium was closed. So like I missed being like plugged into the epicenter. Like I literally could have walked to Martin's Aquarium, and thank God I didn't, because otherwise my formative years would have just been covered with serpents. Like it would just,
I remember going and seeing, so this is the first time I've ever seen an adult reticulated python. It probably was maybe 10, 12, somewhere in that time frame. And my dad took me to this guy's place, and it was in his basement. It was one of those cages that he built, and I just could not understand. Like it was like a mainland, like his head is like, like one of the
dinner plate.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh my God, that's a snake. Like, oh my God,
Yeah, I had those moments because in college we always used to go down to Hamburg for every weekend, because it was one of the things. If you go to college at Del Val, you sneak a snake into your dorm room. That was like, that happened. Like that was part of. You always went to Hamburg and either bought an alligator or a snake. So I remember seeing tons of retics through college and stuff like that as I was still learning everything, and just being like, there's no chance in hell I would ever be able to handle that, own that, or do that. Well, I've had my retic now for a couple of years, so that apparently just went out the freaking window with that whole thing. So yeah.
Did you have a goal with the book? Like, was there something you wanted to accomplish with writing the book?
When I initially set out to write it, no, which is in hindsight so stupid. I don't know why I didn't have a goal, but it became this idea of how can I improve the welfare and education of these animals?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that's what matters to me. I don't care about standing in the community. I would have loved to sell the book to someone else to have their name on it instead. But as long as the information that's out there is out there and can improve these animals' lives, that's really all I care about. So that's why I took certain approaches to topics that maybe aren't typically seen in herpetoculture literature. And that became the overriding view for the book, even on how I approach the herpetology section, because what information should I include that is important to herpetoculturists that they can then use for their own animals?
Yes. I loved how you just phrased this, that you had, the island, the climate, the people, the snakes. I just love that way that was phrased. And like, what was your thought with making that you just wanted to have a complete understanding of where these snakes are coming from?
So you guys go field herping all the time.
Yeah.
After I think field herping really is what did it to me. You understand the synergism of these animals in their environment. It's far different than something like my cat, who is currently sitting on a throne.
Yeah.
They are so in tune with their environment. And there's lots of different ways to approach that when you're writing. You can just solely focus on their ecological niche. You can only focus on the weather. That's kind of boring, but here we go. To quote Kamala Harris, they exist in the context of all that came before them, or whatever that line was. So I wanted to show that context because people wouldn't otherwise know. It's a small series of islands on a map, but there are people there. There is a culture there. There are other animals there. There is biogeography there. So I wanted to include it in a way that people would care a little bit more about their natural environment, and then hopefully care how to replicate that in their own homes.
Very Steve Irwin of you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
yes. I
like
think that's important, though.
It is.
Yeah.
And I mean, the idea that, we can all kind of assume that as when it comes to other reptiles, I would say that retics are one of the ones that I imagine can be rather difficult for the normal person to care for properly.
99% of retic keepers properly.
Trying to find a nice way to say it. Most of them are
okay.
screwing it up. It's like, it's that I'm pretty sure a lot of the people out there are not doing justice to the animal itself, just because of how big it's getting. And I would say that for across the board for a lot of giant snakes. Is that something that you also kind of maybe pushed a little bit into it, as well as kind of trying to take somebody by the hand and be like, no, look at where they're from. Do this, like that kind of stuff.
Yes, and then it also is a reflection of my experience, because as I had said previously, this wasn't a project that came about because I had to trial and error for 20 years to figure out how to keep and breed. That's a whole different subset, and that's fascinating because they had to do that trial and error, and they figured out what worked. There's a reason why ball pythons are kept in CB70s. It works.
Right.
So perhaps going around the issue instead of directly addressing it, because they're easy to keep. Samson kept however many of these alive while others were dying.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's take us, slow down a little bit, take a step back, appreciate where they came from, appreciate how to turn that into better care on our side of things, and then go from there, because someone will take that and hopefully find new ways to improve the husbandry that I didn't even think of.
Yeah.
This is I haven't really kept retics like this. So, and I didn't get to it in the book yet, but when it comes to these different, like you have some retics that are on the islands and they're in caves and they're eating bats. And is there certain localities that are kept differently, like maybe similar to, like, say, a diamond python and a coastal carpet python, and maybe a Darwin is kept just a little bit different? Like, I believe that there's like little tweaks that should be done as you're going through these subspecies and in different environments. A lot of people say I'm crazy, but I kind of think that, like, they come from a specific environment. They're supposed to do specific things. Is there a difference in any of it, or is it sort of just a cookie cutter approach?
That's a great question, and it feeds off really well into your previous point, because with the diamond pythons, obviously they come from a very different ecological niche than something like, I guess, a centrillion.
Yes.
Just to pull something out.
Yeah.
But with reticulated pythons, even though they have the largest natural range of any python in the world, it's very similar across the climate and even in their ecology, which is fascinating in my eyes, because they're mostly along the equator. They're not getting huge variations in temperature. And that's why I focused on the Slayer Islands, because those are where the insular populations we see in captivity are mostly coming from. So that's what most people will care about. But it's really uniform across that entire range, which I find very, very interesting, because it's so important for you guys. But on our end, it doesn't really matter. And broadly, keep them all the same way. There is very, very, very minimal evidence that for breeding Saputrii, so that would be Slayers, Tamalongans, and southwestern Sulawesi's, they might prefer lower temperatures.
Okay.
But this is very, very, very limited. There's like 1 or 2 people keeping them slightly lower. If
Mhm.
someone were to try to breed that as a pure locality, that might be something to look into further. But that is, very,
Right,
we
right.
don't take that to the bank.
Right.
Beyond that, there is nothing too different. Even though, so for the Jampianis, they're mostly cave dwelling. They're still utilizing a cave in a similar way to that a mainland would utilize a tree.
Okay.
So they're elevating themselves, especially when they're younger, because obviously as they're large, they're not quite as mobile
Right.
vertically for obvious reasons. But for the young ones, you always find them up in the trees. And what they're doing is perching themselves up there to find prey that would otherwise not be accessible to them because they're smaller. They can get birds, different rodents, stuff like that, while the larger ones are getting larger food, quite obviously. So even though there are differences like that, they're still utilizing their habitat in similar ways. So broadly, there aren't major care differences, except for if you're trying to breed Saputrii, that's a whole box of worms, very hard to do.
Right.
And that's a lot of different reasons. It might actually be very easy. We just have an extremely limited gene pool. Some people have great success with it, others don't. So
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I guess it would make sense if it's the widest ranging python species that it would, I guess Indonesia, yeah, is pretty much climate is the same. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Owen, are you?
I'm right
You
here.
had like the look. No, you had to look like you were. You're like.
I was scrolling through the things the questions I had written out, and I was trying to figure out a good one to go with. But
I can also just ask you guys questions.
I mean, that's
I
fine
would
too,
love-
and I will answer this everything. Yeah, that's fine.
Reverse interview.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it would just kind of be like so the machinations of going through the book. Like you said, he kind of started with this like as a school project. When did it kind of progress into that this could be something that could actually be published? Like this is something that you kind of go through and go forward, because any reptile nerd like us has somehow been like, I could do this project about snakes, and then like stiff-armed a professor into letting us do it. Like you actually went further.
Yes. So, preface: I'm insane.
Okay.
We'll just answer all of your questions. Actually, the moment that I kind of understood that this could and possibly should be published is that I was teaching the people things who I was incredibly reliant on to teach me things. So I would say something and they would say, "Oh, I didn't know that," and that rocked my world because so much of my own information had come from them, and then I was developing my own ideas and finding new information that they didn't even know. We talked about that with captive history.
Right.
So that's when and they're obviously very large names in the industry. And so that's when I kind of pieced together, oh, maybe this is actually a worthwhile endeavor to be published. Because I could have written this all out, submitted it, and had been done. Instead, I spent a whole nother year, my first year in vet school, trying to.
Which I hear those are the easy years anyway.
Yeah,
the first
really,
year of vet school.
really easy.
Yeah. It's breeze right through it.
Yeah. Writing it your senior year of undergrad and then finishing it in vet school. Really, really simple.
So yeah, not a lot to do.
I would have had a lot more time and my grades would have been a whole lot better. But here we are. So it just kind of became this thing where I was learning and then also helping other people learn. And why not put out a resource for even more people to learn? Because if these people who I held in such high esteem were still learning things and unable to answer my own questions, why shouldn't I be able to put out a resource that can answer other people's questions?
Yeah.
That's. I wanted to real quick circle back to the arboreal thing with the youngsters, especially. Again, when I think of a retic, it wasn't until recently that I thought of them as being sort of arboreal, because I don't know if that's how the hobby portrayed it. I don't know if they were just so big that they weren't able to give them those type of things, and maybe those keepers knew that? Is that something that is sort of looked at in the retic hobby currently as something that is very important for young retics, or is it sort of?
That's a good question. I would say it's actually reverse, which is kind of, it would not what you would think it should be if you're going off a natural history perspective. Um, Typically for young ones, you're trying to reduce as many variables that can cause injury. That's why we keep them in tub systems, keep them on
Sure.
paper, simple, simple. The less things you can screw up, generally, the better for the animal. Once they're more established in your care, then we start to have fun, right? So part of that is generally keeping in smaller enclosures. And then once they grow larger, then they can start to utilize more of an arboreal setting. However, that's not typically what they're doing in the wild. Obviously, they are moving up and down somewhat as adults, but most of the time they're more fossorial compared to young animals and subadults. They're up in the trees. You can find Dan Maleri's videos, actually. I just thought of that. Very easy to go find. Google it on YouTube. Google it on YouTube. That was good.
Good enough. It's great.
Google is now. Yes.
So I would like to see someone try to adapt that more natural history based approach. However, it's really hard. And that's something that's not necessarily appreciated in the advancing side of herpetoculture, is that there's not a whole lot of cages that would support that. Even if you get a clutch, let's say, or you have 30 baby animals, that's a lot of animals. Trying to keep them clean and then also trying to provide them height is very difficult when there's not a ready-made solution compared to, a very typical rack that's only 6 inches tall. So until someone listens to the demand, and there are some companies that are starting to play around with this idea, but nothing very meaningful, which is disappointing. And I think going back to, Morelia, this is very similar with green tree pythons, because if you look at their natural history, during the day, they're 20, 30 feet up in the trees, and at night they come down. And we keep them in 24-inch tall enclosures. I'm guilty of that too.
Right.
So until we start to get better resources for people who are trying to do it properly, we're kind of at a stalemate, which is very frustrating. However, now that there's more interest in it, I think people will do it. And it's so easy. Just go out in your backyard and get a stick, throw it there for a little bit.
Just do that. Yeah.
And you will greatly improve that animal's life. You'll greatly improve your experience with it, because you get to see it interact in ways with its environment in ways you had never seen before. There's those videos of them curling up on palm trees. I'm sure you've seen them. Everyone loves those. I've never seen it in person, but I would absolutely love to, because that is the coolest thing in the world to me, that this 12-foot python can go up this tree.
Right.
So there isn't a huge push for that right now. I hope there is. And then, of course, historically, people have been keeping the mainlands in 12 to 18-inch high enclosures. That's luckily changing as well. But by the time they are adults, they're not going to utilize that height like they would have. But I think shelves are a great idea. I don't know if they would use it like a roughie, but
I think Garrett's sort of messed with ideas with this. I believe. I think I saw him do something.
I think
like
so
that
as well. He's talked about it. He talked at least to me about it. I don't know what the manifestation of that has been, but you're right.
I think though that this is sort of my frustration when it comes to herpetoculture, right? You have a group of people in the hobby that are asking for a solution to a problem, and they're defending racks as like this concept that we've had, for 20 years hasn't really improved in any type of way that I think like my argument to racks would be, okay, it's just a box is a box. Okay, fair enough. We can make the box any way we want to make the box. But if you want people to sort of, continue to use your products and be in business, that you would think that you're going to have to adapt or you're going to go extinct.
Right.
I don't understand why that's such a hard thing. It's like a CB70 is this general python tub, And I even myself have been in that situation, and I still have animals that are that way that I'm slowly trying to move to caging and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I guess it's again, it's like they're trying to take, I think everything is like trying to replicate the ball python world because everybody made money from it. Everybody became a rock star. You know what I mean? Like this idea that you can be somebody in the hobby just because you put two snakes together and they bred and they made some kind of crazy looking snake. I don't know. That just seems like a silly achievement to me. I don't know. Maybe
I also think it's one of those where I'm trying to do as much as I can with the smallest, the space that I have. And having something like a rack gives me 10 slots, gives me 10 animals, gives me this thing. So I think a lot of it is that where it's like I could go this way, but I would have to decrease my collection. And that is sacrilege. I can't do that. That's impossible. Why would I do that? Then I'll be one of the normies. Like, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, no one will know who I am with my 12 animals. No, I'd rather die. Like, and that's.
Don't you think? Don't you guys think though, with a species like a retic that you don't want to keep? I mean, just the workload alone would be. I don't know.
Have you guys ever seen a mainland poop?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Holy shit.
I used to take care of we used to have a 16-footer tiger. She was a tiger retic, but it was a production, and it was like great. And the problem is we had her in, and it's one of those looking back and then looking forward again. It's like we had her in a Cages by Design cage, which those are the ones where it's like metal screen, a fake like press board printed. No, not even that. Like it's a fake press board. Like they printed a jungle on a piece of plywood. In the back, and then you had sliding glass doors. Tons of vertical space. Nothing for her to use the vertical space. She was just there in the corner, and then she'd kind of go over here and kind of go over there, and we'd have to take her out to let her soak in a big bin because there was no room for a water thing in there. And it's like, looking back, it's like, well, shit, we could have given her something to kind of get up on or crawl, and yeah, all that fun stuff. And that's the same thing of going into the zoos. Like I said, at the Columbus Zoo, it was the same thing. It was this big enclosure, rock crevices, stuff like that, and then a big pool, but there was nothing. There was tons of vertical space. It was just wasted. Like there was nothing there for the thing to climb on, and all it did was just curl up and sit in the corner.
Yeah.
So I think with an animal like that, you should look into something to kind of like, there's all kinds of things now to give as much vertical space as you can. I love 15-quart tubs for growing up carpets, but they're useless without perches. It is basically just a tall tub. You put a 3D printed perch in there or a couple of sticks and stuff, it's tons of space. It just adds to it. Yeah. So that's kind of where it would go with that. Is like, yeah, but I've seen mainland retic shit. It is horrible. It is like a Rottweiler snuck in and crapped in the bin. Like it is even bigger than that. It's just, yeah.
But to your point about the 3D printed, that only exists because there was a demand for it in the carpet python world. And now that's being carried over to the retic world, which I think is great. And because someone else had the demand, it's obviously a little bit different for carpets. They're going to actually perch a little bit more than a retic would. But still, that's a great product, and it's so easy, and they're cheap to make.
Yeah,
they're easy for breeders because you can clean them. I can't speak highly enough about that.
Well, my thing is, and what drives me absolutely bonkers, is we have so many people at the reptile shows that apparently have like an army of 3D printers.
Yeah,
but they're printing little dragons and like little Pokemon. I'm like, will somebody please just make goddamn perches so I can buy them and put the, like, I don't want to have to ship them. Like, I want to be like, oh, it's walking in, get my rats, grab a couple perches, leave. Like, I don't. Instead, it's like, look, this spider jumps. I'm like, I don't care. Just please.
Right.
I'm sorry, that was a diversion.
You guys had David Brahms on the show a couple months ago, and he said he's almost going full time with it now.
Yes, and he has great stuff.
Yeah, I love. Oh gosh, I love that. I love this stuff.
That's so dangerous because I can think of so many things to put. Like,
gosh.
okay, let's do this.
I think to me, like, I mean, if I were given somebody advice coming into the reptile world today and like how they could do it full time, to me, that would be where I would focus, right? I would sort of like say, okay, I'm going to keep this type of animal. And then you're going to learn from keeping that animal of like, you know, ways that you can prove it or ideas might pop into your head of how you can do things differently and use the technology that's available today to sort of, you know, capitalize on that. You know, I mean, there's just the rack alone. I mean, you could come up with a prototype of what you wanted to rack. I was talking a couple shows back. I was talking about these taller tubs, and actually, a guy makes them, and he says he brings them to Hamburg all the time. Owen.
Apparently, I just don't pay attention when I
Yeah,
wander around
apparently.
Hamburg.
But like instead
venomous
of
snakes
using
and crocodiles everywhere.
You gotta dodge the black mambas as you walk down the aisle, and people trying to sell you pit vipers. You just kind of gotta, it's weird.
But it's basically like a 6-quart tub size wise, but like it's taller. So it,
which is nice.
Like that, it's got that. So now you have just a little bit more height.
Do you remember the tubs that Buddy had his like scrubs and chondros and stuff in? They're those big, thick plastic ones that I guess we used to have them as food bins at the lab because they have like
the camo
lids and
tubs.
stuff. Yeah.
That's what I have my ice in right now.
Well, them and Christmas tree tubs. If I could redo my shit, it would be get rid of the 41s and get a ton of Christmas tree tubs because the perching and stuff you can do in those things, it would be like having a 40-gallon tank on wheels like casters.
Exactly.
And I'm like, I would do that. I would definitely give more vertical space to a lot of my guys. I'm a big proponent in shelves. My Retic uses her shelf all the goddamn time.
Yeah.
And probably because she has a full length shelf that goes from end to end in the back is the only reason that she's been able to kind of keep doing what she's doing in that cage, because it's like she has the floor space and then she has more floor space. So it's like it's a cheap way to add more space to your cages. And I have a ton of scrap PVC plastic out back sheets, and I'm just been adding shelves to snake cages because I have the fun rock outcroppings that you got like in some of those cages by design cages. I have a couple of those, and the snakes love them, but you can do the same thing just by getting a little piece of flat PVC stuff, and it's right there. My scrubs love that they have shelves, and they don't come down off of those, which is terrifying. So
yeah, I don't know how you keep scrubs.
It's a lot of yelling, and a lot of prayers and hoping. And later, when I go to pull her off eggs, hopefully, I'll be more excited that I got it, and I won't think about the fact that this tiger shark shaped snake is now, in front of me. So
yeah, you're talking about caging. Real quick, as the one I tabbed it, and there's a picture by Dougie Smith that he has this huge enclosure.
I love that.
And picture of that's below the enclosure of where that Retic is just sitting there and just like, it's just perched over waiting. Oh my God, that's fantastic. I mean, okay, let me ask this. Is there a lot of people in your experience with talking to all these people in the Retic world, is there a move towards that, keeping less and keeping because they are a beautiful animal. They are an impressive animal. So you could keep one or two in an enclosure like this, sort of give it what it needs. And or is it still people trying to just focus on breeding? Because this year I tried to focus on trying to put forth the idea that you do not have to be a breeder to be somebody in the reptile hobby, or to be known, or to enjoy it. Like you don't have you don't come in and it's like, oh, you have to be a breeder. You don't have your breeder's card. Like, you got to get out. It's not that at all. So I don't know. What's your thoughts with?
Nobody checks. You don't there's not somebody being like, hey, you haven't bred and
but it
get
is
out.
Though.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
No, there's definitely a skew towards that. It seems like everybody is built towards it. It's shocking when somebody's like, no, I don't want to breed this animal. I'm just buying it as a pet. People are like, oh,
it's just strange to me. Like if you look at all the other pet, categories, people don't go out and buy like 10 dogs. All right, I have 3, Owen. I know. I
Well,
get it.
no. If we
But-
stack yours on top of each other, we'll
Yes, it
equal
equals
a
1.
dog.
Yeah.
Like we equal a dog.
Exactly.
You have percentages.
You know what I'm
Like,
saying? You know what I mean? Like it could be like, I think in the right hands with the right experience and somebody that really wanted to do it, they could be an amazing animal as a pet, you know.
The dogs?
But there's sort of like even me just saying it, I feel like cringy when I say it. It's like, oh, that's a pet key. You know, I don't know. Am I wrong? Is that
no?
Okay, go
The
ahead.
connotation is the hardest part because for so long, respect was earned by doing things the hard way, and we've progressed beyond that, and that's not appreciated yet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to your original question about shifts in husbandry, I cannot speak highly enough of the people who are doing that and then leading others to doing it more so, because we're finally seeing a movement towards that. And the biggest thing has been, of course, a market correction where people aren't buying retics like they used to. The investments are there, but they're becoming less so, especially with not being able to import anymore, though there are ways around that apparently.
Oh yeah.
But because there isn't that financial drive like there previously had been, people are now taking a step back and saying, how can I better suit the animal? And it's also a great business strategy, and that's not appreciated because the person who keeps in these beautiful naturalistic enclosures can probably demand a far higher price than someone selling the exact same animal in a traditional enclosure if they've been marketing themselves as doing it differently and then showing why it matters and then showing why it would matter in that animal you can purchase from them. No one's really perfected that, and I think that would be a great way for someone to differentiate themselves. And if I could still keep retics, that's what I would be doing.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen online, I think there's one person, I don't even know his name, who has this giant enclosure that you have to walk into, and I think he has like 2 berms or 2 African rocks in it.
He's in Europe. I don't know.
I want to say he's in Europe, but it's beautiful. It is what I would want if I was doing large animals like that, because it is basically having a zoo enclosure in his house and all this other stuff. And everybody I've talked to who sees it absolutely loves it and that it's stunning. And I think that would be the way you would do that. But I think that's just, does the normal person visiting a reptile show or purchasing a retic, is that in their capacity? And is that something that should be in their capacity? Because I almost feel like a lot of it now seems like we're trying to smash the retic into a size that is manageable, as opposed to being like, well, we should just make sure that we keep, in the right kind of size cage thing. So I don't know.
You're trying to fit a square peg through a round hole.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The mainlands are mainlands, and they deserve a level of respect that most people can't provide. I'm not one of the people who can provide them. That's why I love the insular stuff. I get the benefits of keeping a retic while keeping it in a more, I will also say, better environment, without having to worry about being severely injured, because of course that's a real issue. We're talking about up to 20-foot snakes that have killed people before. An 8-foot one killed a lady not too long ago, unfortunately. Just a terrible accident. So for the average person, they may not fully appreciate that 24-inch baby that they're getting is going to grow into a 20-foot animal. And what does that, what does that actually end up looking like? We're talking about retic poop. Most people don't understand what that's going to look like. Wait until you feed an adult retic something they hadn't eaten before. They will splatter their poop. It is absolutely disgusting. Feed a varied prey diet early on, and frequently, people, because if you no longer can get your rabbits and you have to feed pigs, you will be paying the price for it.
Very unhappy. Yeah.
So I'm hoping that with the increase in popularity of the smaller animals, and the increase in popularity of people like the gentleman in Europe, and then Dougie Smith, who's also in Europe, we will see these animals gain the respect again that they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about the smaller stuff. We talked about this with Lucas when he was on, but one of the things that I used to feel was misleading a bit with the retic community is that they would portray them as the size of carpet pythons. And I'm saying, I know carpet pythons and I've had super dwarf retics, and they're, I mean, a 12-foot snake is still a 12-foot snake. You know what I mean?
It's still a pretty big animal. Yeah.
That's almost to me bigger than a carpet python. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, I don't know. That's still
that's a stretch.
It's sort of like, and I could be wrong, and you tell me with your process of writing the book, it kind of felt like it was almost like a used car salesman type of approach, where it's like,
have you been talking to Rodney Bullich?
Oh, really?
I love Rodney. He is my favorite guy in the world. But man, he can.
I love Rodney. He takes no shit, and that's what I love about Rodney. Much. Yeah.
No, that's one of his phrases. That's why I love Rodney. No, okay. Before you go on, everyone knows Rodney for Rodney's antics, but he has been the most helpful person in writing that book. He's very nice, very knowledgeable, very willing to share it. Obviously, he can push it sometimes, but just very knowledgeable, great guy.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Okay, back to the used car salesman before I derailed that.
I just feel like it's like I don't know, if I was being a Python person at heart, the idea of me wanting to get a retic would be that I would want a retic of what you would get in the wild. I would take a smaller one. I get what you're saying. Like, as far as like, I could manage a 12-foot snake, I'm sure both of you guys could manage a 12-foot snake. But I think it's almost
manage 12-foot.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But I think to your point of what you're saying earlier, it's like when you're at a reptile show and you see this beautiful little baby retic, you're sort of captivated by how pretty it is, and you're not thinking about what this animal is going to look like at 12 foot.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think that's a problem that happens across the reptile.
I think pythons in general probably run into
pythons, but reptiles in general. Ain't nobody thinking about the alligator. They just want the alligator. Nobody's thinking about an alligator snapping turtle. They want the alligator snapping turtle.
Yeah, but you're not saying that they're dwarf alligators. You see what I'm saying?
Well, what do you think a caiman? What do you think a caiman is? What do you think the market of a caiman is? The market of a caiman is it's an alligator or a crocodile, but it won't get that big. Okay, all right.
That's used car salesman.
10 feet, but it's still a 6-foot crocodilian. Like, it's
Maybe I'm weird in the idea that I think that if you're going to get a reptile, that you should probably want that reptile and know about what you're getting. And
how fucking dare you?
It shouldn't be something. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be something that you're talked into. If that makes sense.
You want research and knowledge prior to ownership. What the hell have we? No. It is an impulse buy, and I will keep it in my bathtub. God damn it.
Fair enough.
I feel dirty. Yeah. I don't know if I'm okay with what just happened here. I think I went too far. So
no, not far enough.
Not far enough. Okay,
I pushed the buttons. I know how to push the buttons, Glenn. I know how to operate them like a machine.
But that's the problem, is that you have people who they come up at a reptile show. This is an awesome looking animal. What is it? And then they're busting out $100 bills. And it's like, us as breeders and keepers have to have the restraint of, maybe you shouldn't buy this, being that you just learned its existence 5 seconds ago. But that's hard. And some people don't give a shit. They're just like, cool.
I think this is what I love about TRL, right? Is the fact that they're addressing these issues and they're not sort of used car salesmen. They're you know what I mean? Like they're I don't know. They sort of take ownership of that idea and sort of are putting information out there that that sort of says like, look, this is what you're going to be getting into. Make sure that you're ready for this. Yeah.
Right. And that's, I mean, there's a reason I bring adult animals places to shows, because I feel like people should know what they're getting into, because, you know, again, it's a tiny little worm, but, you know, that's going to be a 6-7 foot bredli. You know, it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, and there's no easy solution.
Nope.
Did you guys get to the purchasing guide part of the book yet?
I did not.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
down towards the end, so I don't know if you...
Okay.
I did skim through it, but
Okay.
yeah.
So in it, I try to instill a lot of that. And I also took the approach of what should a breeder expect of the buyer, because most of the time it's whoever is going to give them the money first. And that is asinine to the nth degree in my mind.
That is bad. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the most influential things for me in herpeticulture has actually been learning about how to ethically breed dogs, because that is a world I was unaware of. For the longest time, I was only go to shelters. If there's an animal in the shelter, why would you purposely breed an animal? And now, having learned of the reasons, it is eye-opening. And I ended up buying a purebred dog and love it. The next one will probably be a rescue, just for, you know, how the cycle works. Yeah, like this stupid cat that showed up at my neighbor's door 3 weeks ago.
About right.
Yeah. So with dogs specifically, you are trying to progress the breed, and we don't see that in herpeticulture. And that's what makes me want to bang my head up against a wall, because pairing your normal ball python to a normal ball python, just, you know, for sake of argument, is not progressing them in herpeticulture. There should be a reason for every breeding. There should be a reason for the animal you're producing. With retics, that's very hard, because you can be going for that 1 in 264th odd, and that animal can be worth $10,000, and that animal is progressing the species, but the 75 pos double hets aren't.
Yes.
What do you do with those animals? Because they're not going to end up in good homes. And that's a very unfortunate reality that isn't publicly talked about enough. There's a lot of private conversations, but the sad reality is the higher price will demand generally better care. And there is a vast amount of animals that won't be treated the way they deserve because they are seen as byproduct.
Yeah.
I think too. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, is there, all right. The bad word in Morelia is cull. If I say that, we get emails, and I said it. So here we go. Is there a push to potentially cull animals in Retic, or is it just one of those, you think that, because my thing is that I don't even necessarily think we need to cull the animals in Morelia. I think we need to breed with some sort of sense of not to overbreed ourselves, not to get over our skis responsibly. And then maybe we wouldn't even need to cull animals or feed off animals, because that's always the thing, is people are like, well, I got a monitor or I got a Crebo, and it's like, I'm not even necessarily sure we need to do that. So if it's just responsible breeding, would we even need to go that far as culling?
That is a great question. This is going to be a long one, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for
First, I will just give the overriding preface of whatever you do, if you decide to cull an animal, talk to a vet, because even though we're saying culling and not euthanasia, there is a proper way to cull an animal. Putting it in a freezer is not the right way to do it. The AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, has guidelines for euthanasia that's publicly out there. So just because you are culling an animal, there is right and wrong ways to do it. Talk to someone who knows these animals, knows their physiology, and knows how to do it properly, so they can guide you. Because yes, you can be doing it for the greater good, but you're causing harm on that animal. Whereas if you're doing it properly, you aren't necessarily doing it, even though it ends up in death. We strive for good death. So first off, talk to a veterinarian, because
do that.
Talk to a veterinarian, talk to someone who knows this. Don't do it wrong. Do it with respect for the animals. It's the same reason, why we eat meat. You should have respect for the animal, respect for what it took to grow it, and respect for the byproduct, because we're not eating eyeballs in America generally, but that is a part of the animal. So what use can it have? So broad preface, and then it's interesting, bringing up Morelia and culling, because I hadn't heard that before, but that would be a really fun conversation to have, and it would probably be an episode on its own about jaguars. It's actually because there's another jaguar mutation in Retics that suffer neurological issues
Right.
as well, and now it is almost standard practice to cull them. Not quite, but people, including Rodney, have tried to breed out that effect, but they can't do it. Sometimes they'll get animals that are less likely to display those symptoms, and then in the following clutch from that animal, it'll be the worst one you've ever seen. So it is pretty clearly linked to that jaguar mutation in reticulated pythons. And we also don't know what that animal is going through. We're only seeing the signs. We don't know if they're experiencing something like vertigo, and how disorienting that would be for a snake. So, talking about genetic mutations with obvious imperfections, obviously beyond their morphs are having imperfections from the wild type anyway. That's a stupid argument. I don't want to hear it. So with culling, I go back to, how do we give these animals respect? And if you're able to do it in a proper way, I don't see anything wrong with it. That'll probably get me some
emails
backlash.
too.
Yeah, but there are far worse fates than death. Because if this animal is living life in subpar conditions, it may only live for 5 years, and if that life is horrible for 5 years, what's the point?
Yeah.
If it can give life by being used as a feeder, that's the easiest way to do it. And there is a demand for that. I didn't even think of venomous until I heard someone talk about it on a podcast. It was actually, I'll just say it was Desiree on Chondro Barroom. They were talking about how they could try to do with Cold Blooded Cafe, how they could get feeder snakes because they have king cobras and other.
I have. I know the person who takes care of their king cobras, and he and I have talked about it several times because there's a zoo by us, Reptiland.
Okay.
And they are one of the premier reptile zoos, but their claim to fame is that they handle king cobras. So other zoos get king cobra babies and they just box them up and send them to Reptiland, because Reptiland is an all reptile zoo. So they get the king cobra started. And the way they do it is that they have so many milk snakes and rat snakes that they just keep tossing them to the baby king cobras. So it's like, we give the snake feeders snakes and then they eat, and then here we go. So there is, I think, a demand for a lot of odds and ends when it comes to different feeder species. So who knows? Maybe that is the next step.
It's unfortunate because we are valuing something with a certain color over something else, and by valuing it, we are killing another animal, which is on its face horrific. However, if we can give life by taking a life, that is a worthwhile endeavor. We don't think twice about it for feeder rats and feeder mice. There's a push for feeder lizards now, especially for chondros. I think it's good because it's, their natural prey, closer to their natural prey. And then for hogs, they're more lizard and toad eaters, right? Frog eaters.
Oh yeah, frog eaters. They'd be great to have some kind of frog that I can trust, because I speaking with a couple people, because even then rhino rat snakes sometimes start on fish and tadpole, and to have a source of food that I can trust over, because I know some people have gotten into trouble where they've gone and set up a cage to catch minnows and feed to their snakes, and then all of a sudden everybody's got nematodes or something like that. It would be great if I had a trusted source to get frogs, fish. I kind of have that with I go to a local supermarket, but I can only get so many frog legs. If I could have like a pack of like frog, that'd be great. Or like the one tadpoles that are changing over, that'd be awesome. Anything to be kind of push that a little bit. I mean, I've seen kind of a little bit more of a push with avian bird. We're starting to see birds of other sizes, quail of different sizes, different species to appeal to different kind of stuff like that. I routinely give my Retic chickens. Like
They love that.
chickens. Oh my God, she's a monster. Chickens and then rabbits. So it's like she's excited no matter what. But I've also given her rats, a chicken wing, a turkey. Like
you could feed it anything.
Anything. She scares the crap out of me that way. It's like anything goes in here, and but it's fantastic. It's like I like the idea of a varied diet because she's got a little bit of chunk on her, but she's not fat. And that's, I think a lot of times with these animals that they don't have something the size of, one of my spare bedrooms to live in, they're going to get fat. And that, I think, is just decreasing the life of the animal. So I think some instances, other prey items help limit that. My white lips stay lean because I give them rats, but then I also primarily give them birds. I've seen tons of white lips just get absolutely huge because they get big, and then people are like, I can give it retired breeder rats, but should you? Like, I don't know if that's what you should do.
Right.
My olives got fat on guinea pigs because I'm like, they're big snakes. They didn't breed until I slimmed them down. So sometimes I think it's in the best interest to look at the whole picture of how much are they moving, how much are they eating, kind of stuff.
And so the reason why we see a lot of fat retics is, especially for the wild caughts, the way we could keep them tame is just keep them full all the time.
Fat.
It worked. Obviously, while you guys have worked with them, and I'm sure you've worked with a mean retic before. If you keep them fat, they're less likely to go after you.
Yes.
So that is something that worked. However, I think we're past that. There is some level of domestication, and I have a huge asterisk on that. But there's selective breeding towards behavior. So we're less reliant on that, and we can move towards an approach focused on the health of the animal. And that also comes to where are you getting your feeders from? Because, you were talking about nematodes. That is not something you necessarily want to introduce. I have wild caught anoles from Cold Blooded Cafe. However, they deep froze them to, I think, negative 144 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius. And there is not going to be anything that I am concerned about pathogen wise that is going to survive that and then survive being in my freezer for another 3 months and then being heated up to at least 100 degrees. So yes, they are wild caught. And I really dislike that. However, the appropriate steps were taken to minimize any pathogen spread. Now I can offer something better to my animals.
Right. And I think I think there was a couple of years ago, one of my professors in college, she had a new student who was doing papers on animal nutrition and stuff like that. And he wanted to interview somebody who does reptiles. So she sent him my way. And he was constantly it almost seemed like he was trying to get a gotcha moment with me because he kept trying to figure out ways that we could maintain animals without having to feed them another animal when it comes down to reptiles. And I'm like, well, that's not how the food chain works. And also, something still has to die. Like, but it's the best way to kind of do that to make sure that we're not wasting the food and that, the animal is progressing. Cause it's like, I will bend over backwards to find something that one of my animals will eat. I have a pack of African soft furs that I got a new Angolan male and he just will not eat. And I'm like, you're like, no, soft fur time. Like, you're going to be this kind of a dick. Fine. Soft furs. After this, we're moving on to like chicken. After that, I got a bunch of bullets in the gun, but maybe. I mean, I've wasted I wasted 2 rats and a mouse on him. So I'm like, that's enough out of you. We're going soft furs. We're going some chicken, possibly some other stuff. And then, it's just kind of like, we'll figure it out.
I did want to circle back to the dog thing and how you said about forwarding breeding. I
Mhm.
thought that was a very interesting thing, and I think that, and maybe I'm wrong with this because I don't really know about breeding dogs, but aren't they focused on more than just color and pattern? Where they're focused on health, they're focused on temperaments and all those type of things. Is that I think that's something that we miss in the reptile hobby, is that we're only focused on color, pattern, and that's pretty much it.
You're
Yeah.
getting another long-winded answer. So
But okay.
preemptively, sorry, but no.
Yep.
For people breeding dogs in what I would consider an ethical manner, they are doing all of those things. Temperament. Um, you have breed standards, which are really nice because you have a set of confines that you're working in. You're not just throwing paint at the wall and seeing what you can create.
Mhm.
Sometimes it turns out to be Jackson Pollock, and sometimes it turns out to be finger art
Mess.
from a
Yeah.
yeah. So there are stricter confines, which is really nice. And then with dogs specifically, you are looking for titles. So I love Australian Shepherds. So typically herding is the big thing for them.
Mhm.
Just how they interact with their environment, agility,
Mhm.
all of these little things that there are competitions for. And then there's things like canine good citizenship from the AKC, and there's different levels of that. There's so many different trainings and different certificates you can get, and everything you do increases the value of the animals in that litter, because you can show you are selectively breeding for something other than looks. You are going to be producing animals that share these qualities that the adults have, and
Mhm.
we have deemed those good. We have deemed those worthy. They have certificates.
Mhm.
So I would love to see something like that in reptiles. That's pretty far fetched, though, and I fully recognize that.
Mhm.
Um, I have been thinking, and I probably won't do it, but about breeding chondros. I have them; they're fun. Um, and I was building a breeding plan, and it works out well if you try to go for three things when you're selective breeding.
Mhm.
Beyond that, you're shooting for the stars and you're going to land somewhere else.
Mm.
Um, you won't even get it up into the atmosphere. So I was thinking of doing health first and foremost. So
Okay.
for chondros, the big thing is serpentoviruses or nidoviruses. So being
Yeah.
able to show negative results from the parents, obviously from the school, because we have a diagnostic lab and that's kind of the gold standard. And
Nice.
then the other things, so arenavirus, cryptosporidium, and then paramyxovirus. Those are the three big other pathogens beyond serpentovirus that I'm concerned about. So health, vigor. I would want the babies to be eating well. You hear that all the time for chondros and even for some of the carpet pythons,
Mhm.
that they're just hard to get started. There's a
Mhm.
lot of different factors with the Australian stuff, unfortunately, in breeding because you have a limited gene pool, which sucks. I hate that for you guys.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
It's fun.
yeah. And then you're feeding them something other than their natural
Intended
prey,
prey.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially for their size. And then for number three would be extreme phenotype. So because color is of course rewarded in herpetoculture, you do need to include that. But
Yeah.
those were the three pillars that I wanted to base my breeding program around. And then I could show how my current animals exhibit those and how the future animals will also exhibit those. So for people who are interested in having healthy animals, vigorous animals, and good looking animals, I'm, a fairly easy source to go to because I can show that.
Right.
Yes. I like that. Because I
Yeah, I
was
like
going
that
to ask,
too.
how would you apply that
Yeah.
to reptiles? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
So test your animals, have animals that are hardy, good to go, and then of course have color. Color is the easiest to manipulate, which is
Mhm.
Yeah.
the good thing. It's not hard. Breed two
Yeah.
good looking animals together and you're probably going to get good looking animals back. Not
That's
hard.
the easy one.
Yeah.
Like that.
It is ridiculously easy. That's why everyone does it.
Yeah.
Rob Worrell for Green Trees is a great example of someone who bred for vigor.
Mhm.
Luckily I have some of his animals from his lineage in my own collection. And color happened to appear out of that. So just by focusing on something else, a further beneficial quality can pop up serendipitously.
Yeah. It's curious. Did you run into people that are concerned with the inbreeding and retics at some point now that we can't import?
Yeah,
anymore?
I mean that's kind of like you got retics are now kind of where Aussie species were a couple years ago. It's like now they're not coming. So
Yeah.
what's the plan?
That is a big conversation in the locality type specific, communities, because we have a very limited gene pool and people aren't great, about tracking, which bothers me a lot. So, for example, Tamalongans in the US, we only have a few animals that were imported from a wild caught to wild caught pairing. And then they were bred together, so they're full siblings, and that's all we have. And people are there hasn't been another pure Tamalongan pairing since I think 2017 or 2018. So people are having really a lot of difficulty with the F2s. People are able to cross them to other stuff, but I haven't heard of any successful pairings. And that's within 2 generations. So that's very frustrating. We're running out of wild caughts, which is the easiest source for genetic diversity. What I would say is you can do it. Just be very careful about who you're getting animals from. Ask them hard questions about where their stock came from. Obviously, making sure it's legit, which is a huge hassle. Or you can just not care. You can breed within
Do
some
whatever.
species. Yeah, go for it. Breed pure super dwarfs. You will not have to worry about inbreeding for a while, because there's obviously a great deal of inbreeding for insular populations regardless. However, when you're removing selective pressures from that, then you're going to see those more deleterious effects pop up because the weak ones aren't dying, which is something that's not appreciated in captivity, unfortunately. So there's that. You can cross, or you can focus on the localities that have been bred for genetic diversity. So going back to Rodney, his Ternate Island locality types, he's done the math. I think he can do 30 different pairings from his animals just based on the wild caughts, and then like 900 based on the F1s. It's ridiculous. And they're all because he's tracked it, and some of them look special. There's a great deal of phenotypic diversity within that locality type. But then his Halmaheras, I think he's at F2, but there was only that original wild caught, if I am correct. So you're kind of stuck there. You're going to have to probably cross it into Ternate. That's the closest looking locality type if you want to keep that look. So
that's it. So there's no, I mean, there's nowhere else to go with it. So it's, and I want to say we kind of run into those walls when it comes to carpet python. I don't want to say like some locality, but I don't want to say that there's a subspecies out there that we don't have a mate for, or we don't have like that it's completely shut off. But we've run into that with a couple things where it's like you have no other option but to take the closest thing to it, but that it's gone after that. Once you cross that bridge, there's no crossing back, and
you cannot take out the jungle from a diamond.
Right, you cannot. Once it's in there, it's in there, and that's
right.
And that's it. I mean, we've had that with. What if we come closer with that? I want to say some of the lines in some of the localities, but I want to say that we haven't crossed that yet, right?
Well, I think this is you tell me if this applies in the retic world now, but I think that the intensity of keeping things what you would call quote unquote pure is the idea that when you're just crossing these things to morphs, yes, you're out crossing, you're just making these, it's sort of where the concept of Cullen came for carpet pythons, was the idea that, you know, you're going to have these snakes that look like a jungle or a coastal or whatever, and you could definitely pass them off at a show and somebody would think that they're a normal coastal. And I guess that's okay if you're just keeping as a pet, but if you continue to breed that into the future, you're going to run into those things not being represented as what they are, you know? But I feel that, you know, when it comes to I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but my perspective with the Retic thing is that they were just trying to make the morphs as small as they can. So it's similar to what happened with chondros, right? There was no idea that there was multiple species. I mean, you could look at an Aru and a Biak and you can sort of say, yeah, these might not be
They
the
look
same
different.
snake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A little bit
But they're
different.
still an arboreal green snake.
Yes,
Right,
all
exactly.
the same thing. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
To our eye, right, we're
Mhm.
going to see something different. But to the regular person, they're just saying, oh, it's just a green tree python. We're going to put them together
Right.
and breed them.
Yeah.
So then you have that idea, and I think that happened with Retics, right? I mean, they were sort of one thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, this might be a separate subspecies.
Which I don't understand why it took that long to get there. It's like there's all these different islands. It's like,
well,
but
probably hard to
island
get to,
localities, island species don't matter for Retics. Everything else, but not Retics.
That's a good question, and I hadn't really considered that. I talk about the taxonomic history, and they were Python reticulatus for like 100 years.
right?
There wasn't a whole lot of focus on really dividing it up, which is interesting. Now, I hadn't considered that. So going back to your original point, Eric, this happens in all subsets of herpetoculture. It's whatever. However, the implications are the most dire for reticulated pythons because of the size. So as a baby, you can easily pass off a mainland for a 75% wild type super dwarf or 87.5%, even probably a pure super dwarf to a lot of people who haven't looked at enough. And then all of a sudden at 2 years old, their animal's 10 feet or plus. And they thought they were getting an 8-foot snake. And that is horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, is there some sort of like you're kind of responsible in that, like as a seller, like that's you should take responsibility for that. Like you should make sure that that's not what's going on here. Like
you'd think,
I don't know.
It goes back to having the right snake end up in the right home for the right person.
Right.
And if you don't care about that, then, why not pass off your mainland that would sell for $75 as a pure super dwarf that you can sell for $1,000. It doesn't, unless that person goes to the show, if you haven't been banned.
And brings along their 12-foot Retic. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not seeing that as much anymore because there have been people, Garrett's been really good about this, putting out information that really goes against that notion. So people aren't so naive because it happens.
That's
happens way too frequently, and the animals are what suffer.
Yeah. Because I came prepared to deal with this and I got this. That's, in my eyes, that's like trying to upsell somebody from a corn snake to an olive python and being like, same thing.
Yeah,
totally same setup, same everything. You just don't worry about this. Just plug this in and it's fine. And it's not.
Yeah.
I think those people will find, let's say, an exit in herpetoculture, hopefully in the future.
Yeah. But
if there is a demand for it, and I hope there is, and I want to inspire people to create that demand. I'm seeing inklings of it, and let's hope it continues.
I would say that there's a lot of people out there doing it the correct way, but there's like for every one person that's doing it right, I think I find one person that's just kind of. Part of it is that I'm still shocked there are some people still doing or getting away with insert like A or B, and it's like really. Still, like, yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Glenn.
Oh no, I was just agreeing, and
that was it. Yeah, no, that's all you can do. Yeah,
yeah.
Well, let's think about that for a second. I think I think part of that is the buyer too, right? Meaning that, I mean, Owen, we've seen
it is all their
fault. This
yeah.
happens. No. This is what I mean. you have somebody that comes in, they want to buy
Yep.
a jungle carpet python, and they walk up to your table and they say, "Oh, I want to buy a jungle carpet python." Okay, my jungle carpet python is $500. Meanwhile, over at
Yes,
this
it
other
is.
table, the carpet python is $100. That
Right.
buyer is going over there to buy the $100 snake, maybe because they don't understand the difference between the two. Maybe we've done a terrible job at educating the people on what's what. Perhaps I don't. I'm not saying that it's
Or
all
they're
their
just,
fault,
or
but
they
I
only got
think
$100 in their pocket, and that's
am
what they're
I
going
am
to
I
spend.
wrong to think that, like, if you have unscrupulous sellers, that they're going to take advantage of that person that's going to buy based on price?
100%.
I mean, I see that. That's why I really, you know, don't do reptile shows, because of one of that kind of idea that, like, I don't feel like arguing with people about I'm trying to sell you snake. I guess I'm a terrible salesperson. I don't know. But
Yeah, that's
I don't.
You're bad at this. Like,
Either you want to come buy it or you don't.
or you
Right?
don't,
I
or
mean,
get out.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean? I don't know. I've tried to sort of, over the past couple of years, I haven't bred because there's a multitude of reasons, slimming down the collection or whatever. But
Mhm.
I'm trying to also show people that you don't have to breed in order to do something in herpetoculture. You don't
Right.
have to do that. It doesn't have to be that way. Anyway, that's sort of a side tangent, but I don't know. I just sort of think that, like, when that person's looking for the cheapest thing that they can get, and they probably shouldn't be buying it to begin with, if that's what they're going for. You know what I
That's the
mean?
first
Like,
problem.
and
Yeah.
that's where I say that, like, a lot of times when the reptile hobby doesn't police itself, like, they don't, because and I understand it from the breeder's aspect that, if they're doing it full time, they have to make money, or they have to make money in order to feed their family. They have to make money in order to feed their snakes. There's so many things that come into it that you may be like, oh, okay, well, I have to get rid of this snake, so I'm just going to sell it for, I don't know. What do you guys, what's your thoughts? Am I crazy?
I want to hear Owen's thoughts because he lives in this world more than I do.
Do. I think there's a special price that once you get below that number, it's like anybody can walk up and get this thing. And it's like, I think keeping certain animals above that number is the responsible
Your
thing.
filter.
Right. It's the responsible thing to do. Like, if an
Okay.
animal dips below $200,
You're
like
tracking a different world.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
especially if it's a python. If it's a colubrid and it's under $100, whatever. Like, I mean, you'll find some of the most, like, hardened corn snake people be like $40. Like, and but that's just it. But the second a python, and I think just going carpets, people are like, I want the best carpet python you have under $100, and I don't put carpets under $100 for this reason, because the people who are getting them is that they have the $80, they have $100 bill, and they're going to get the biggest carpet python they can get for this $100 bill. And it's like, no, what are you going for here? And that kind of stuff.
Under $100, it becomes an impulse buy rather than somebody that's, and you don't.
Right.
Okay. All right. I get it.
So,
I
but the problem is that I'm not the only guy pushing this cart. And if some random person who has a pair of jungles or whatever breeds them, and
the unethical breeding,
right, and doesn't want to worry about getting them feeding, just wants them gone, slaps an $80 price tag on it, everybody's gonna be like, I got a jungle for $80, and that's that. So it is hard, especially with, I've seen animals that might have issues or problems. So one of the main things is I always used to see D-grade retics that just push their faces and stuff like that, or they had the dolphin head thing, and it was D-grade retic, $100. I'm like, wait, that's a retic. It's still a retic. Like, it's that kind of thing. So again, and that's the other reason is I won't put animals below a certain price on my website or on Morph Market or anything like that, because then it just becomes haggling for the sake of haggling. It's like, it's up for $100. Would you take 60? Well, being that you're in California and it's going to cost $100 to ship it to you, why are we doing this? Like, and that whole thing. So there's ways around that kind of stuff, and there's ways to protect yourself as a seller. But yeah, there are people out there. It's why I don't really advertise wholesaling anymore, because I used to say, like, I have a bunch of carpets and I'll wholesale it, and people would buy my carpets and then they'd appear on Craigslist the next day for like $100-something bucks or something like that. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't like this. So
Yeah, it feels dirty, right?
yeah, well, that's part of it, where I have certain species where people are like, I'm looking for a snake, I'm looking for a good pet snake, and this is all I have. That's a different conversation, in my opinion, than the I want this animal for this. If you, all right, good pet snake under $100, I got corn snakes coming out of my ears. Okay, like I got, and you know what? Even if I don't have a corn snake, there's king snakes, there's other stuff that would be a great pet for this kind of stuff, but maybe not a carpet python. That's why it's not priced that way.
Right. Okay.
Definitely. And that's a very good differentiation that you made, because we shouldn't be pricing people out of the hobby, but we need to be pricing out people who wouldn't be giving the animal the life they deserve or the respect that they deserve. I think carpets should be $500 because of the amount of selective breeding that has gone on for generations and generations, the time it takes to establish them, and they do get a little bit larger. $100 corn snakes, $40 corn snakes. Great.
It's fine. It's fine. I tend to keep my stuff in like the $400 or $500 range, and then dip down into like the 200s, depending on pattern and color and stuff like that. But I rarely ever go below 200. It's one of those, maybe if I have a $200 animal and you're talking about it a lot, and again, I see like you're a cool person and are going to take care of it, yeah, then I'll definitely dip down lower. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I think there was one time at a Tinley Park where I had a really good looking carpet python, and I was just so nervous about not selling anything that I had priced it low. And somebody came in, we were the first table that they managed to stop at, and they bought it. And I'm like, and I just felt bad afterwards. Like, it was one of those, like, maybe that was not the right person to sell this thing to. And they'd sent me a couple emails further down the road asking advice and help, and I helped them, and they did okay. And then I just stopped hearing from them. But it was one of those, where it's like, if I had put that a little bit higher, I would have felt a little bit better about that, just because then maybe somebody who was just like, first table snake in our price range, let's go, that kind of stuff. So
you haven't made that mistake again, have you?
No, I have not. It's one of those, especially with other things that I think command even more respect. Like, I've had people try to talk me down on things like false water cobra, and it's like, well, I only got $100. I'm like, then you don't get one. Like, it's not this thing. Like, there's corn snakes over there. So yeah.
You I'm curious, is there anything that when doing the book that you learned about retics that like blew your mind? Like,
surprising.
Ooh, that's a great question. Part of it is how long they've been in captivity for. That was astronomical to me. And this is a stupid answer, but their size. It is obviously it's the most one-dimensional aspect of them, but there exist snakes that get up to 25 feet.
Yeah,
that is dumbfounding.
Yeah.
I wish there was a better answer than that, but these are behemoths, and it's so foreign to think about that this naturally occurring animal can get this big and can eat people.
Yeah.
And eats people fairly regularly, about once a year. And on a more positive note, how many people are open to improving their husbandry, learning more things about them, improving who they're selling to, all of those little things. But in terms of actual shocking information, the number of years that they've been kept, and then just their sheer size.
Yeah, I think it's in the chapter with the size and the associated dangers, but you have some pictures of wild ones that, like 6 or 8 people, 10 people are holding. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I think that was awesome that you put that in there because, sometimes when you're looking at the morph pics or whatever, where they're
Mhm.
like kind of like the background's taken away and it's just sort of, it's kind of like you're not necessarily seeing what a monster that they are.
Yeah,
They're not getting big anymore either, which is kind of sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
what
Because everybody's
what's
breeding away from that, right?
yeah,
Well, no,
is
even
that
the
part of it?
mainlands are getting small.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sucks.
Is it kind of like the main thing of like, so like fish in a lake, all the big ones have been caught and killed, so now they're not passing their genes on, so now everybody's kind of getting a little bit smaller? Is that kind of thing where like the big retics aren't the ones producing babies out there in the wild?
That's an
Or is it we're not
interesting.
letting them get that big?
For the wild, yes.
Yeah.
But you would expect that in captivity, because we've had so many years of importation and so many huge ones imported, that we would see, continually larger animals. But we don't. We're seeing the exact opposite. And it's hard to know for sure because there hasn't been a study on this and
Mhm.
no one's explored it in depth. So I'm extrapolating, but we probably feed too much too early on. So we're limiting the overall size potential of the animals. We're keeping them in too small of enclosures, so they're not fully reaching the musculoskeletal development that they could be.
Right.
Not feeding varied prey diet, so macro and micronutrient deficiencies possible. Who knows? And the urge to get the female and male up to sizes quickly as possible, so we're not seeing 15-year-old females laying clutches. I don't know if that would have an impact.
Right.
Theoretically could. Obviously, for humans, male sperm, it reaches a peak. It's obviously not when you're at puberty, but in terms of efficacy, and then it decreases with age. So maybe we're not breeding males at their peak. Obviously, maybe not breeding females at their peak. Maybe we're doing something wrong on the adolescent husbandry. Maybe we're doing something wrong with incubation. Who knows?
Mhm.
But in the wild, we've removed a lot of the huge ones and we've taken away a lot of their environment and replaced it with palm plantations.
Yeah.
They're still doing great in that, but I don't think it is as conducive to having huge ones as there used to be, but they're still doing absolutely fine. But I don't have a great answer of why we're not seeing the massive ones in captivity anymore, because with the essentially free feeding, we should be seeing huge ones.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the exact opposite. So that would be a really interesting study for someone to do. It would be incredibly hard, but if someone wanted to do that, they could contact me and I could probably give you some ideas. You need a lot of money and time,
Mhm.
and good luck finding that. Welcome to science.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is something to think about with that kind of, like you said, there was always the talk of, I think there's one herpetology group that has like a bounty on a retic that gets over.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
And
in
it's
the
like,
book.
you'd think you'd get there by now. Like you can't be that freaking hard. Like,
Yeah.
and I've seen some of the I've seen firsthand and actually helped carry some of those big Bob Clark animals that were sold to Columbus Zoo and stuff like that.
Yeah, Fluffy.
Fluffy and the predecessors, they were all fat. I mean, oh
Yeah,
my
that's
God,
the
they were
issue.
huge. That's the problem, is that you can't get them that big. But Eric and I talk about it constantly, that we saw a 10-foot water python, saw it, held it. That's what it was.
Wait, in the
10-foot water
wild or
python.
in
Yep,
captivity?
in the wild. But it was living in the botanical gardens in Darwin. So it had no predators, and all it was doing was acing possums. Was it the healthiest representation of a water python? We don't know. It looked great, but
That thing was humongous.
yeah, is it breedable? Is it healthy? Is it going to live for another couple of years, or is the thin one that can get places that this thing can't going to be the one that lives? So that was the hard part, is like, yeah, all right. Are the retics that are getting huge, are they getting huge because it's just the size that they're going to get, or are we pumping them full of stuff and they're really just giant obese animals?
So the original tigers, like Fluffy, she was an F1 pure Sumatran.
Yep.
They were huge
Mhm.
and huge for several generations. and we're just not seeing that anymore. Also, we're seeing. I wonder if it's. I'm never rescind that. I was going to say I wonder if it's related to color, and then I realized how stupid that was. So nix that. But it's a shame that no one's necessarily breeding for big size like they used to. I know Weston, winner of Wildfire, is trying to get really big retics, and he's using pure localities to do that. Probably the smartest way to do it. I briefly talk. I kind of just guess at it in the book. If you're trying to get a big animal, I just say, feed it varied diet, slow, consistent growth, large enclosure. That's kind of what we know. Just for the animal's health, using pure localities close to wild cots, selectively breeding for large size. So we'll see in 10 years if that proves to be true. But I mean, for white lips, you see the huge fat ones, and I'm sure they are far less fecund than the skinny ones.
Yeah.
I've never gotten. Every time I see a proven pair, or it used to be every time I saw a proven pair of white lips, I was like, no goddamn way, because they were so small, thin. But then constantly seeing videos of people finding them in the wild, they are a thin-bodied tree-dwelling snake. They need to move fast because there are bigger things around there that will eat the hell out of them. So, yeah. And I got, when I slimmed down my male on a completely bird diet, is when I got eggs. So that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I would say that the other part is that just imagine the space you would have to do for having a project on, I'm going to breed retics for size. Holy shit. You
Good
better
luck.
have a goddamn airplane hangar, because it is, you're like, I got to keep back this entire clutch of 300. Like, it's, no, man, that's a lot.
Yeah. There's a reason why people don't do it.
And those are babies that eat like, it eats a mouse right out of the egg. Like, no.
Yeah. That was the other thing that I thought was very good that you included in the book, was the sort of the feeding chart thing.
Ooh, yeah. So that's interesting. I'm glad you talked about that. I had written a very, I would say, normal herpetoculture type feeding chapter. And then it was just at school one day, we had a lecture from a boarded reptile veterinarian who is a genius. And this was for gastrointestinal. And he was talking about how it was on reptile digestion. And he said, the biggest thing, or one of the number one reasons you're going to see reptiles, is because of obesity and the associated issues. And he put up a recommended feeding chart, and he said, feed adult snakes every 8 weeks. And I was like, well, wow. And then he said, well, if you look at their physiology, the intestinal villi, so what absorbs the nutrients, is they will slough that off and then regrow it. And that takes, I think, at least 15 days. So if you're feeding more than every 2 weeks, you're interfering with that process. And I raised my hand and I said, how often would you do for neonates or young adults? And he said, 3 to 4 weeks. And I went back and I verified this information, and I realized, oh crap, I need to rewrite that chapter because it's so easy. We see it so commonly with retics that they are just these lards. They have fat rolls. They are nothing like their wild counterparts.
Right.
So why not offer a more naturalistic and healthier solution? Feed the animal less frequently. Retics love huge meals. That is one of the things that experience has shown time and time again. They want to be fat and immobile for a while.
Right.
That is, you can feed a prey size that you thought would explode the animal, and they will love it. So don't be afraid to feed big meals. And then just do it less frequently. It works out, and it's cheaper for you. That's what I don't understand.
It is.
There was a paper. I don't know if this is similar to what you're saying, but basically it was on Burmese pythons, and it's talking about how their digestive system, when not in use, sort of like shrinks down, which to me is that's insane. Like, why isn't anybody talking about this? Like, I just can shrink my digestive system down and I'll be all right for a while. I mean,
I'll just chill here.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Foreign
Maybe I'm a
to humans, it's
nerd.
hard for
I
us to
don't know.
understand. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, to me, it's just like, wow, that's a fascinating thing. That it's
Mhm.
just amazing. But wow, okay.
So
Well,
feed your snakes less.
yeah,
Less.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's cheaper, better for
See,
them.
Owen. See,
He
Owen.
said less but bigger meals. You get that?
See,
It's when it's
Owen.
less but a
They give
pinky,
me
it doesn't
shit
help.
because yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I thought, were you talking about the rough scales? I thought you told me that they had to take smaller meals. I heard you wrong. That's why I approached it that way. So
It's okay.
I have
It's all right.
since
I
corrected.
give you my
Course
babies.
corrected.
And listen,
This
I
is what
give you
you
my
do.
babies. You do what I say. Okay. Like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's that clutch
Okay.
doing?
The roughies?
Mhm.
No, they're fine.
Oh, you got them established and everything?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're rocking and rolling. I
See,
mean,
now you can claim
I'm
you're
only
breeding for
down
vigor.
to I'm down to 3 point. No, wait, no. I'm down to 2.2 babies left. That's it.
Good for you.
Everybody's
Wow.
gone. And now I got like you might see a head. There she is. Yeah, she's watching me.
She's waiting.
We're gearing up for because my smaller female is now right on level with my bigger female. I'm like, ah, crap. But wait, they could both lay 16 eggs. So yeah, it's if I end
Oh,
up with
yeah.
30 roughies this year, I'm gonna be a happy person. So yeah, that'll happen. And then in the next couple of years, I'll eventually have like 3 or 4 females going, so it'll be cool. But no, they're great. But Eric got a pair, and I'm getting ready to move my guys up. And he's like, "You said smaller meals." I'm like, "For now, now they need bigger ones. They're good now. Give them more." So
Right.
yeah,
That's one of the hard things for people who haven't been doing this is deciphering what prey size. And there's not a good way to talk about it either.
no, there isn't. It's also one of those things where I find myself in that mix where I'm like, I give them hoppers because that's all they get are hoppers. And then I'm like, yeah, I should probably like, and then I either run out of hoppers and I have to give them a small mouse and they take it easily. And I'm like, ooh, shit. Like I should have moved you up, I guess. And then, or in the case of my nephew's corn snake, it escapes and then murders and eats like 3 hoppers in one sitting. And I'm like, I was feeding you fuzzies. Like it is like it broke into my mouse cage, killed and ate several hoppers. And I'm like, all right, you can move up now, I guess. So
Happy snake.
yeah,
Yes.
it's hard to gauge that kind of stuff because we don't want to push it. But also I would say that in some instances where the cycle feeding works, there's another way of cycle feeding, which when they come up, giving them a larger meal than what they're used to. Like you said, retics want to be big, fat, and happy. I think a lot of Indo species want to be that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like what ends up pushing them in the right direction is you bring them up from winter, you either feed them like crazy, because that's how I keep hearing about how that's how you get Timors to breed, is you feed them like crazy until they are almost like bursting, or you give them a bunch of really big meals. And that's when you start getting ovulations. So maybe that is part of it too with wet lips and Timors and other Indo species. So maybe you think more along the lines of retic knowledge for other species.
Maybe that
Yeah.
could be. I mean, Timors are the most closely related species to retics. So try it. Why not?
I mean, that's the plan for this year. Yes.
Oh.
So we'll give it a shot.
If you fail, you can blame it on me.
I fully intend on actually Brandon Wheeler handled my female. So if I don't breed this year, it is
It's his
entirely his fault.
Oh,
Entirely
good.
his fault.
Yeah.
He also handled my Dunai. So again, if it's all Brandon Wheeler's fault. If I don't breed, it's because of him.
Damn
So not because of anything I did or
No.
like the majority of their care. It is 100% Brandon Wheeler upset them.
The last question I have for you is, what in the world of reptiles are we not talking about?
Ooh.
I like that question.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to sit here and think about that. What are we not talking about?
That we should be.
That we should be? Oh
yeah.
god. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
that we shouldn't be talking about.
There's a lot of shit that we're
Smuggling.
talking about that we shouldn't be talking about. Yeah.
I'll call an audible, and easy is testing for communicable diseases. That's easy.
Yeah.
People should be doing that, but that's so basic. I need to find something deeper. I would say the how do I phrase this? The shrinkage of maybe selling opportunities. It's hard for people to sell beyond Morph Market. They're seeing that as the only platform, or
To be
I
honest,
don't know. Maybe
I put out a poll because I was thinking about, because right now I let my Morph Market expire. And I have my own website, and I put out a poll on my Facebook page. I'm like, where would you like me to post up things? The majority by a long run was Morph Market, like a ton.
I go on Fauna all the time. I will.
I mean,
gladly say that.
Fauna.
No one uses King Snake, so
You just have to get with Fauna though. You have to fight through the Morph Market ads to get to the like the ads for Morph Market because they purchased them to get to the actual classifieds on Fauna, and it's like, really, guys, come on. But
you guys probably remember there was a time there was what was Will Banks's like Reptile Bay. I think the reptile, it was the guys who were I'm forgetting his name, the ones who were doing Pro Exotics. They had their own marketplace. Robin and Chad, thank you.
Or not Chad Gray, I'm sorry, just Chad Brown.
Oh, Chad Brown, yeah.
Yeah.
What were the other? There have been a lot. You guys have been around for so long.
There was that Find Your Reptile thing. There was there's a couple, because there's always seems to be one come out and then somebody goes on it and fights with the person who put out the who owns the site, and it's like, screw it, I'll make my own and it'll be better, and then they go off and it like flounders, or it maybe kicks off for a little bit but then doesn't really go too far.
So is your thought that there's only that there's not enough places, like we're not getting out to a bigger audience? Is that sort of where you're getting at? Or
that's part of it. We need to find a system that rewards differentiation beyond just having, a specific type of animal and a specific color phase. How do we decipher who is putting in the time to establish their animals, who is putting in the time to test their animals, who is putting in the time to care for them properly, who's putting the time to make sure they're going to the right homes? That's a really hard thing to do. I don't have a solution for it. And I think competition is always a great thing because there are other things that can pop up that I'm not thinking about that someone will. That would be great additions to better find an animal. Maybe like an AKC registry. People talk about that all the time and it never goes anywhere. And it's just so hard to do.
It is, because and Eric and I were actually talking about this the other day, and it was because on one hand you have some people that want to move the boulder up the hill, and it almost feels like there's just as many people on the other side trying to knock it down.
I've been avoiding that conversation,
but that's part of it.
My undertones have said that.
But that's part of it, because I remember when all the stuff, and you brought him up earlier, when all the stuff came out with Samson Pruitt.
Yeah.
And, the videos, the pictures, the all that other stuff. But then I remember I went onto his Facebook page when all this was going down, and there was somebody had literally posted the keep your chin up. Once all these goody two-shoe new people are out of the hobby, we can get back to business as usual. And I'm like, how is that the takeaway? That once these a-holes that pointed out the problem are gone, we can go back to doing what we're doing. It's like, and that is the other part of the reptile hobby we don't talk about, is there seems to be somebody active, like a part of it that actively pushes it down because they don't want to improve and have to take responsibility for things beyond that. So
I will say that since the book has come out, I have been pessimistic about herpetoculture. Been trying to avoid that conversation all night, but there's a reason I'm not going to be breeding the chondros anymore.
Yeah. I mean,
I almost called someone to come.
We don't do ourselves any favors, because on part of it we're doing that, but on another part we're look at me juggle these taipans. It's no favors.
Yeah, we were talking about how It's actually the episode that'll come out tomorrow, but well,
sneak peek
before this episode.
Oh, wait.
Anyway, we sort of
Yeah.
talked about the idea of like the reptile, whether it would be USARK or whether it would be some other type of organization that would sort of put I don't want to say regulation, rules in place of standards of the hobby of like
standard operating procedure.
Right. That the reptile hobby, adopts and sort of says like, maybe there's some sort of licensed tier like they do have in Australia or something like that. I know nobody likes talking about this kind of stuff, but I feel like it's either we do it ourselves or eventually the government's going to come and do it, and we're not going to like what they do. So why not just to try to be proactive with it rather than reactive? I don't know.
I try to conclude the book with something like that. So the easy example is I live here in Florida now. It is completely illegal for a private citizen who doesn't display these animals to keep them. I would much rather have a permit system where my animal is microchipped and a known entity with FWC and be able to keep it in a locked cage in a locked room, and maybe even have to do an inspection, how awful that sounds, but I can at least keep them. Versus now where I can't do that at all. So it's a give and take. We can't have it all. We've shown that when we do have it all, we kind of misuse it. No one wants to say that, so I'll say it and get the backlash for that.
No, I mean,
we're all going to get backlash tonight.
Come at me. Tell me why a teenager should be buying a crocodile at Hamburg. Okay,
just
justify it. Do it. Yeah. Show me that they're going to backhoe half their yard to build an enclosure that the croc can only be in for like maybe 2 months out of the year, and that they're going to be able to functionally move that animal back indoors without getting murdered. And I will, sure, that's going to happen. No, it's going to live in a bathtub and die.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. If my idea is being too good to legislate, to where we take all of these ideas and we put it upon ourselves, and then there is no reason to have a external oversight if we are doing such a good job being an internal oversight.
Right. And that's the problem, is you have to, how do you do that when, like I said, it's on Tuesdays, we juggle taipans. So
I think the other issue you have in the reptile hobby, it's the thing that I love, and it's part of our problem, is that you have so many diverse people that are brought together that normally in any other part of their lives would never interact with each other. And somehow these animals have brought them together on something that they can have common ground with. And, I think that's a great thing. But I think part of in my opinion, just talking off the cuff, you have the older keepers that feel that like, they've put in this work to get the reptile hobby where it is. And I think the younger people feel, and I think it's just perspective. Like they don't understand what it was like not to have a smartphone. They don't understand what the world was like without an internet or an email or any of those things, or light bulbs or cages or racks, or just calling Cold-Blooded Cafe, and then you're getting an order, a box in your thing, ordering a snake from halfway across the United States, and then next day it's at your door. Those things did not exist when the reptile hobby was being founded.
Shipped and labeled as a snake, not fragile computer parts or mixed nuts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like this, you're applying today's standards to people that have been doing it when they're, you know what I'm trying to say? It's like you can't compare the two.
You evolve or you die. And that's pretty much where we're at. So,
but there's also a lack of respect for the younger keepers that are coming in with a fresh perspective. And if somehow we could blend those two worlds in with the experience of the older keepers with the new perspective of younger keepers, like, hey, guys, I don't know if that's the case with younger keepers or not. I guess I would have to talk to them and maybe see where their head's at. But my feeling is that they're trying to do better with enclosures. They're trying to do better with, the amount of animals that they have. They're trying to take better care and like really try to learn about them, et cetera, et cetera.
They want to
I'm
know
not
where
saying that everybody
where the
young
food's coming from.
is perfect and all that stuff. But like, the idea of keeping a snake in a box has sort of progressed, and now I can't tell you how much like not hate. I don't want to say hate, but like pushback I get when I talk about like, even, Owen will give me shit sometimes because he's like, well, if you put boy snake with girl snake and they breed, what's the problem? I don't understand. What more do you need to know? And I'm like, their freaking digestive system is turning off when they're not eating, man.
That's mainly because I don't want. Listen, I don't
snakes.
want you to let me. I don't want to let you behind the curtain.
Just,
I'm not. Yeah,
I
no.
know, but I mean, the idea that like, oh, the snake had slugs this year, and it's just like, oh well, I guess that's just normal python breeding. That's just silly to me. I don't understand.
No, there's a reason for it.
Figure out why. And it's just like, oh well, we put some bullshit answer onto it because it makes us feel good, like we didn't fail the snake or we didn't do something wrong. Somehow it was the male. Oh, it must have been too hot. He didn't have like, you don't know any of that to be the fact. You're just saying that, and then it just perpetuates into herpetoculture. And it's just like this idea that if you want to learn more about the snake and what is actually going on, like we now have the technology that maybe we could do that. Maybe you could be citizen science and try to figure out, if you're keeping a bunch of them in smaller enclosures. I think to me, that's what it's kind of like. It's kind of selfish to me in a way because I like herping. I like seeing the snakes in the wild. If I have it in a natural type of enclosure, I'm sort of seeing those behaviors in my room. That's kind of like, isn't that what we're sort of here for? Like, I don't know.
Well, no,
that's me.
You like to imagine that's what people are here for, but that may not necessarily be why everybody's here. And that's the problem. Is trying to bridge all those gaps. Because somebody be like, I don't care. I just want to know how much I can sell my albino ball python for.
Right.
And that's the hard part. That's the part of it you got to get past. And I don't think you can. And that's the other part is you have to try to, like we were talking about, like, oh, well, USARC should have a standard operating procedure. Good luck getting a representative from every single part of the reptile community in one goddamn room.
How do you pick that person?
Agree?
And,
right. Yeah. Because you know what? I would go and there'd be a line of people saying that this asshole doesn't know shit about anything he breeds. Like, and that's fine. You're probably right. Like,
boy snake, girl snake.
You're right. See, you're right. This is why I should have been more forthcoming. And now I won't make the Congress. Damn it. But that's part of it. Is you have to get all these people to agree, and good luck with that. That's a
hard thing in this world today.
It is.
For anybody to agree on anything.
Right.
Well, thank you, Glenn, for coming and hanging out with us.
I mean, this just went all over the goddamn place.
More to the reptile world by coming and talking with us.
Fighting a fire hose. Like, it's just...
No, this was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people want to get the book, where do they go?
Yeah, so the easiest way is Amazon. For international or signed copies, talk to Russ Gurley. He'll take care of you.
Okay,
cool.
I'll put that in the show notes and all of that.
Thank you.
Okay.
And now you said you're kind of like just in the keeping phase. Is there anything that you kind of wanted to add over the next year or two? Or are you just kind of happy with your green trees and you're just going to kind of chill with them for a while?
That's a good question. The easiest answer would be to expand the green trees. I have an idea of how to do that. And I've considered keeping them outside because I'm fortunate.
In Florida,
a little easy here, considering it was 90 today and it's September 23rd.
That's awesome.
Yeah. There's that. In terms of other species, I mean, there's a laundry list. Roughies would be on there, of course. Bull and I, obviously. Even I love corn snakes. I think they are the coolest things in the world.
Yeah. I think I was talking about getting rid of my corn snakes, and then I got I got a pair of high white reverse OGTs. I'm like, these things are awesome. Wait, no, you're supposed to be getting rid of the damn corn snakes. So
there were some nice ones at Daytona.
Oh yeah. Well, now I'm sitting here and I'm like, you know what? I'm glad that I'm down to where I'm at, and we don't have any Pituophis or anything else like that. And a friend of mine just called and he's like, you around Wednesday? And I'm like, yeah, why? He goes, good, you're getting a pair of adult hypo Stillwaters. And I'm like, wait, and hang up. And I'm like, I don't so yeah.
The easy answer is I could add anything whenever I wanted because there's nothing stopping me. I have this space, but I want to be intentional. I want to learn about the animal's natural history. I want to see if there is something I could offer to herpetoculture by breeding them. I think there is something with green trees. For other species, it would be a little bit harder. The ivory jungle carpets, that is something I do want to add, but
That
that's
would be
hard
those are
to
still
find a really
fairly.
nice one.
Yeah. I like the idea of some species that are on the rarer side or less produced more often. And I feel like if I do those, then I can run around and play with corn snakes too on the same side. Like, it's like, I have white lips and now I can run around over here. Like,
one for me, one for you.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Yep.
No, I fall in love with the idea of a lot of animals, and then the reality of that is very different. So I try to pump the brakes as much as I can. It doesn't always work, but I try.
I'm pretty sure I'm at this point now. I'm one of those tractor trailers that is out of control, going down the mountain, hitting things on my way. So I'll
Hopefully
figure it
there's a
out.
sand drop.
They have one of those ramps somewhere that'll stop me.
Somewhere.
So, yeah.
Awesome. So it's been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Congrats on this
thank you.
book. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I really
awesome
like
so
what
far.
you did. Great
Yeah.
work. And one of the
I
prettiest
assume there'll be
pythons.
another one that
Absolutely
you have to find another species that you're like, oh, you're not going to pull a Justin where you're like, and now I'll do a gecko book. Like,
no, I hate being a public figure. There is nothing worse in the world to me.
I don't want you people to talk about me. Yeah, right.
No, I love doing this stuff, talking to people who I really respect and I look up to. But I am horrible on the day-to-day interacting with people. That is not my thing.
I have to give you like total props for walking around Daytona with your own book and just not even telling me your name. like that is you need to understand that is such an Owen McIntyre thing to do. Where I'm just the fact that I was wearing a placard with my name on it kind of pissed me off. Like
it was the voice, and then I saw the placard. I was like, okay, that's
the same thing happened with Ron St. Pierre. He was like, "You sound holy shit." And I'm like, "Yeah." So I prefer to go to people like, you were at the show. I'm like, yeah, I didn't see you. I didn't make myself seen. Like,
you weren't exactly trying to.
I wasn't jumping on a table screaming. Like,
right.
There were like 2 or 3 times where we were right next to each other too.
I mean, you could have said something.
You could have said something. Hey,
good point.
Like, yep, good point. Yep. So
no, I will say that I believe it's the end of November, I contributed a chapter to an upcoming book called Turtle Preservation. I think the ultimate guide to keeping and breeding freshwater turtles by Russ Curley and Anthony Perleone. I don't know anything about turtles, but I do know a lot about replicating sunlight in captivity, and that's what I was able to offer. So that book is forthcoming.
Nice.
And turtles like sunlight. So yeah,
it's shocking,
Yeah, weird. They kind of need that. Yeah.
They're reptiles, and the sun is the same for a turtle as it is a snake. You just make a few changes. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Even we need the sun.
I mean Listen, I left my prison for 5 whole seconds today. Okay. Like, yeah.
Oh,
outdoors. Right. The hell is that? Anyway.
Thank you, Glenn. We appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us. Yeah. So
thank you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll just quick close it up here. And if you want to get in touch with us, here's some ways you can subscribe and share the show. Follow us on the NPR on Instagram and all the social medias. You can check out our merch store. We have a Discord. We have a Patreon. All that stuff is in the show notes. There's Cold-Blooded Caffeine that we have an affiliate link if you want to get some awesome coffee that also supports conserve wildlife conservation efforts in the coffee producing areas. To me, that's a win-win. I get my caffeine fix and I help wild reptiles. What can be better? And then we have Cold-Blooded Cafe.
You can get all your rodents, and then you got
snakes now.
Snakes, lizards, apparently. Yeah. So but you can go there and you can use NPR 20 to get 20% off of your first order. And FS 250 to get free shipping off any order over $250. So definitely jump on that. And that's it. I think that's all we have for everybody tonight. We'll say thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next week for some more Morelia Python Radio. Good night.